So our final speaker today, I actually met a few years ago at SaaStock and asked him for some advice about sales confidence, which I took on board and grew it to where it is today, I would say. His talk, he's going to be talking about mindset, performance and money, the importance of mindset in the sales environment and supporting the psychology of your team. Kieron describes himself as a serial entrepreneur, having led several buyouts as CEO and creating $100 million in exit value across several B2B software vendors. He's recently just joined a SaaS scale-up, Acin, a global risk network vendor, as CRO in August this year, and I'll hand it over to you.
Well, good evening, sales confidence. James asked me to talk about mindset, performance and well-being. So I'm going to do that with quite a heavy sales spin. I've been in C-level roles for a while. I've led some buyouts and I've invested in some businesses. And over that time, I've learned that quite a lot of complicated, difficult things that we all do as salespeople can be quite simple to do well. So I'm going to start with vision, planning and strategy. So my question to you is, in any sales role, do you have a vision for the next 2 years in your sales role? Because it can't just be achieving your numbers. It needs to be broader than that. Like owning your territory or being the primary go-to vendor, making your customers know that you're better than the competition at something specific. And your plan needs to include all the activity to make these things happen, whether it's lobbying the marketing team to focus their messaging, running specific campaigns, collaborating with industry bodies, you name it. You can't just be selling to clients. More needs to be happening in the background, and you need to be driving that. So once you've got a vision, you need a detailed plan to achieve it, including strategies for each initiative. Think it through in detail, bounce it off the people around you. If you've got a mentor, even better. The army tell you that the better you're planning, the less likely you are to get killed. Well, I think the salespeople in this audience prefer the outcome where you get to live and drive fast cars. So I've modified that to the better you're planning, the more likely you are to absolutely kill it. And the temptation sometimes can be just to get on with it. There's no time like the present. But if you think it all through first, you're less likely to head off in the wrong direction. So that's vision and planning and strategy. So once you've done that, then it's all about the next bit, which I call seeing around corners. And basically, we're all on the hook for a forecast, right? So an important part of the planning process are all your assumptions. Sounds boring, but none of us can see the future, but I think I've learned a pretty neat trick that's got me quite close. And that starts with writing down all your assumptions, all the assumptions that need to be true. And I usually have 10 to 15 for any forecast. And you need those to ensure you hit that number. And each one of those affects the forecast in a certain way. So doing this allows you to update your forecast as the assumptions change. And that gives you a real-time picture of where you might end up. And with that, you're able to take corrective action ahead of time to make sure you accommodate that changing landscape, because change it will. And importantly, some of those assumptions may relate to, say, internal activity from marketing or product. And if you need these things to happen to fill your pipe and do your deals, then they're really important assumptions. And it's when those assumptions start to trip you up, and that's when you know exactly what the impact on the forecast is going to be. And that's what I mean by seeing around corners. You know what's going to happen ahead of time. So, and you only need to do this a few times before you get the right sort of experience and how it works, and that gives you confidence. And that allows you to rely on your predictions because you know that it's a repeatable process. Who'd have thought all that well-being from a process? So thirdly, you've got your forecasting, you're feeling more confident about that, you've got your vision and your plan, and now it's about doing deals. And I call this always taking control. And especially when you're talking about big deals. We've all been told by our bosses not to jump through the customer's hoops, make them jump through ours, and that we have a playbook for a reason because it works. It's the best way to make sales. Well, small sales might be a more simple matter of need and budget, But larger deals have always got more people involved and there's a lot more going on in the background. So finding ways to get to all those people and understand the landscape means taking control of the narrative and not asking if you can meet somebody, rather telling them why they have to meet you. And oftentimes that's not directly related to the requirement you're selling to. It's indirect, which means you need even better reasons to get time in people's diaries and open them up to explaining that landscape. And I've got a couple of examples, big deal examples. In 2016, I signed a customer called Magento. I say I, there was a team of us involved. I was head of the team. And they launched their cloud service with us. And in 4 years, that grew from 0 to 1.5 million monthly MRR. That was about a $200 million increase in the value of that business, the core platform. So, deal strategy is always about getting your customers thinking in the right way. And for these guys, I had to do a couple of things. We had to make them think about the effect our platform would have on their marketplace of literally thousands of online retailers. And for that, we needed to devise credible productivity metrics, which we didn't have at the time, so that we were able to help them weigh up the ROI of the deal, but through our lens. And late last year, actually, before I left this business, I used those metrics to estimate about $1 billion per annum in savings and gains that the 1,800 customers they brought onto the platform were making. So that's really, it's really significant at the start to win the deal and then later on in the deal. Secondly, I had to create the right level of FUD about our main competitor, and we had to socialise that amongst decision makers. And for that, we needed help from an investment bank and a hedge fund. And that was all about research into how they were performing and what they weren't doing well and so on, because it was a big deal. And we were up against a global hosting powerhouse, and we were just a startup doing less than 10 million in ARR at the time. So these two things allowed me to reduce that perceived value risk gap between the two solutions, and it definitely helped win the deal. So that was all mindset. What did we have to do to get the customer thinking in the right way and jumping through the right hoops? So that was a great deal. And another example is another deal, which was a 2019 deal, which we won with Nestle. And that literally tripled in size during the RFP process, because we were finding ways to solicit information from them during the process, which they usually try and stop you doing. So first off, we got a request for a demo license. And that was outside the RFP process. So of course we jumped on that. We turned that into a training and Q&A session, during which we unearthed just tons of positioning gold that helped us tune the offer. And secondly, they specified aspects of the business they didn't want to migrate in the RFP. So I thought, we're not having that. And we spent quite a lot of effort creating comparison tables about why they should migrate these bits of their business. And we found ways to discuss that with key people, and which all made it de facto during the final bid presentations to about 40 people. And that doubled the size of the bid right there. And what we unearthed a little later allowed us to pitch for another big ecosystem that wasn't even out for tender. And we won that also, and that tripled the size of the bid. And it tripled the value, not just for us, but for the customer also, because we had a platform that could take care of so much more than they thought. And I used those productivity metrics again. So both these customers jumped through the hoops that we needed to get them through, despite quite a lot of people saying that it couldn't be done and we'd ruffle feathers and it was the wrong way to go about things. Anyway, I hope I've been able to demonstrate quite a clear link between mindset and performance. And when you perform well, it makes you happy because you're earning well. And that works for me anyway. Thanks for listening.